All right. Well, welcome very much to all of you for joining us today at the tasting hall. We have a really cool presentation, one that it's only been done a couple different times before this. And we have the owner of Union Wine Company, Ryan Harms. Ryan is here from the Willamette Valley. We'll go ahead and start us off on the traditional shot here with the presentation from Google Earth to just see exactly where we're going here. Let's see if we've got this queued up. All right, and we are going to start out here. We're tweaking up a little bit, so we were out in Oregon, but we're starting here in beautiful Chicago, where we're getting last day of summer in the books with a beautiful 76 degrees. We're going to take the fastest flight to Oregon that anyone's ever had. And here we are visiting Oregon. We're going to be coming right down here into the Willamette Valley. And within the Willamette Valley, we are situated very close to the Chehalem Mountains, a kind of a cool view showing the mountains as they kind of do that horseshoe right there through the Willamette Valley. And we are going to come in to visit the global headquarters of Union Wine Company right here. And then we are going to sneak out and we're going to actually do a cool tasting through a number of different vineyards, one of which will be the Beacon Hill Vineyard. And at that point, I will stop sharing that really geeky picture there and spotlight Mr. Arms. How are you, Ryan?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Joe.
It is fantastic to have you, sir, and very happy, especially, you have nothing going on there in Oregon, do you?
No, I'm sitting in the office. There's no fruit on the pad at the moment, so we're good.
Excellent. Well, you have more than enough going on combined with all the craziness of the fires and then, of course, just that regular thing called harvest, which keeps you busy.
COVID, fires, harvest.
Yeah, and then and then a 1-year-old birthday in beginning of next month.
Yes, yeah. She's decided recently that being up at 11:30 is fun, right? As mom and dad are trying to go to bed. So, all good time.
Always fun, always fun. Never a shortage of good times. That's for sure.
And your street view on the front of our offices is also great because I just noticed as you zoomed into it that Joan, who is in our marketing department, is sitting on the stairs out front. So
when I first saw it, I was hoping it was you, but I was like, no, too long a hair.
No. I'll have to go find that for her. I'm sure she'll love the idea that she's immortalized on the front steps, probably talking to Ball about why our can design's not getting approved or something like that.
Oh, that is too funny. Yeah, no, as soon as I saw that, I was wondering it would be quite humorous to know who that was. Of course, you know.
Yeah.
All right, sir. So we have a full house here, and why don't I go ahead and let you kick this off with giving us a little bit of a background on Union Wine Company and how you got this fantastic company started.
Absolutely. So, I think the interesting thing a little bit about the story is some of the parallel path that our companies also have, or some of the shared journey. So I came to Oregon in 1997. I was just going into my junior year of college and decided that I was less than enamored with college at the moment, had thought I was going to go into medicine, and after a challenging semester of organic chemistry had realized that the idea of med school was maybe not what I had dreamed and wanted it to be. And at the time, Rex Hill Vineyards was fairly forward-leaning and actually had a website. And on that website, Lynn Penner Ash was also silly enough to have her email address exposed. And a young college student very quickly was pestering her about what were opportunities in the wine industry. And I'm pretty.
Oh, Ryan, if you can hear us. Oh, we lost your audio, but I think it just came back.
So years later, I kind of teased her about this, but I'm pretty sure she was trying to get rid of me. And she said, you should really work a harvest. Like before you would switch, schools and go to UC Davis or something along those lines, you should work a harvest. And I'm like, sweet, give me a job. I'm going to be, in California for the summer. I can come right up to Oregon. And so finally she relented. And I very randomly, as a kid from upstate New York, got an opportunity to come to Oregon, work the illustrious 1997 harvest. Can't quite see everybody on this call, but many people probably haven't had the pleasure of trying those wines, but it was a very challenging Oregon vintage. Probably one of the vintages for people who've been here for a while who would say it kind of typifies the challenges we have of making wines here in Oregon. But I was hooked. I absolutely loved it. I also happened to work not only with Lynn Penerash, who, as my career would progress, really helped me in a number of other key moments. But in that harvest crew that year was Josh Bergstrom. He was just getting ready to finish college. His family had just purchased the property in Dundee. We became fast friends. My senior year of college, instead of, going to Cancun or, off the coast of Texas, I went to Burgundy and spent 2 weeks hanging out with him while he was at winemaking school in Burgundy. So we became quick friends, and Anthony Filiberti, who is a partner in Anthill Farms, a small Pinot-centric producer in Sonoma, he was also on the crew that year. So there's just some people who have gone on to do some cool things, and it's just reinforced for me how much I love this industry, the kind of interpersonal relationships and that can be built, and the kind of longevity of them. So I don't know, some 20 years later, here we are. Still in the business, and a little more gray hair, a few more pounds around the midsection. But so I after that kind of amazing experience in '97, I came back full time in 2001. Josh Bergstrom gave me an opportunity to help work in vineyards and in the cellar. And in some respects, my career is typified by being in the right place at the right time. Ended up having winemaking stints at Torrymore Winery, and then came full circle after Lynn Penerash had left Rex Hill to pursue her own project. I had an opportunity to come to Rex Hill as the winemaker, and was there in an interesting period for Rex Hill. They were having some challenges with keeping the Kings Ridge and Rex Hill brands separated, and how do they go to market? And so they made a decision to mothball the Kings Ridge brand. Which is where I enter in another way into the history of that brand. And that was 2005 that I had the opportunity to purchase the Kings Ridge brand, and Union Wine Company was kind of born at that point. I knew I wanted to make wine. I was intrigued by the idea that there were only a few brands, one of them being Kings Ridge, that were focused on kind of value Pinot Gris from Oregon. And I think as someone who was from the East Coast and into wine, I think after my experience in Oregon, I realized, now mind you, everyone has to remember this is late 90s, early 2000s.
When Pinot Noir was really inexpensive.
Yes.
Not at all.
Yes, exactly. And also the distribution of it was not what it is today. And so, I think that to find interesting Oregon products, in the East for me was really challenging. And what you could find was, for a young kid just out of school, was too aspirational in terms of the price points. And so I've always loved the challenge. When people tell me that I can't do something, or you can't do this for whatever reason, typically, makes me want to dig in and actually, validate whether their opinion is accurate. And I think this business is kind of typified by that. So value price point really made sense for us. The first couple of years, we made wine in the kind of excess capacity of the Rexhill facility. And when A to Z purchased Rexhill, I knew my days were numbered just in terms of kind of capacity available there. And so we created the industrial chateau by leasing about 10,000 square feet here in 2009. It doesn't quite look as nice as your town hall picture. That's not something that I see here, but it's been a great place for us. We are here in an industrial yard, basically right on the outskirts of wine country. It's probably the closest I've ever lived to my home in Portland. So it's very convenient for most of my staff who live in Portland, and we're very close to wine country. So it's kind of a great intersection for us. Moving forward, or kind of leaping forward a number of years, we purchased this property 2 years ago. And you can see in that aerial image, there's a bunch of steel, stacked. I mean, it's literally an industrial yard. But we're going to have control of the entire property at the end of this year and continue to kind of build out the vision that we have here. So it's awesome. Been a fun story, from a little winery in the scheme of things in the back corner of an industrial yard with 10,000 square feet to, today we're the largest winery in Oregon, and continue to be entirely family owned. My brother works with me in the business, and continues to be fun times and a fast-paced environment here at Union.
That's awesome. Well, it's I've always said one of the toughest parts about our family business, 130 years old, and having 9 siblings, the toughest is the same as the greatest. It's having family to be able to support you and back you up at the same time as having to see your brother every day. And it's, oh God, it's the same challenges we had when we were 10, and he's begging me to, take the rest of my Pepsi, but it's always a good time. And I have to say, in the toughest times, it's the greatest partners you can have. 100% trust them, and 100% know that they have everybody's best interest at hand. So that's a great part.
Yeah, 100%.
So we had represented Rexhill for quite a while. When two of my brothers worked with Lynn, and I think you and Matt overlapped at some point there. Boy, that 97 harvest, that was definitely a challenge. And I remember I had a chemistry minor. I had to take that organic chemistry. I was just like, this is not for me anymore. And then my counselor was like, you only have to do one more class after this, inorganic. I was like, oh my God. Yeah, not fun. No way I could have been a doctor though.
No, I quickly became like the environmental studies major, which was, kind of science light. We had a little science in there, but.
Right. So today we are doing something fun. I've really enjoyed all of the different visits that we've had here at the Glunz Tasting Hall. Ryan, to have you here is awesome. So thanks for taking the time. But we are actually kind of taking a deep dive into Kings Ridge Pinot. Why don't you tell us what we're about to do there?
Yeah, so I kind of glossed over it, but Kings Ridge was developed as a brand in the early 90s. And, going back to the longevity with the Glunz family, it's been a brand that you guys have represented in the market there. Can't even do math, 30 something years now. It is a brand that originally was Oregon appellated, but its roots are all in the Willamette Valley. In Kings Ridge, originally with the Rexhill property, there was a new property that Paul Hart, the founder of Rexhill, was developing, and he called it Kings Ridge. And Joe started off in the Chehalem mountain range, showing you guys some of the aerial image there. And it sits right in kind of the gentle slope coming up into the Chehalem mountain. And Kings Ridge was the name of the original vineyard. And they decided that early on, the quality of the fruit coming off there might not likely make the Rexall label. And so they needed a place for that fruit to go. And that they decided was Kings Ridge. Now you may think about that. You've just developed this great vineyard in the early 90s in this up and coming region. Why would you have kind of a second label called Kings Ridge? I don't think Paul was a brilliant marketer by any means. And I think that was something that plagued them for a long time. So they eventually renamed the vineyard Jacob Hart, which today is still part of it is still in the Rexall family. But Kings Ridge was no longer connected to that original Willamette Valley piece. But I think we've really looked at, its history, and within our portfolio, this kind of exemplifying value in the Willamette Valley. And this tasting that we've put together, I think not only speaks to the pedigree of some of the vineyards that goes into the Kings Ridge Pinot, but is a fun tasting to just kind of bounce around to the different vineyards within the sub-appellations of the Willamette Valley to get a little idea of how different some of these vineyard sites are when, as the crow flies, you might be a mile away. So another part of, I think, our business where terroir, site are so amazing, and the same varietal from short distances can be such a different expression depending on where it's actually planted.
Absolutely. So I've got some slides here. I'll go ahead and, I think everyone's biggest challenge with me hosting these damn tasting halls is that I could talk to you guys forever on a lot of different subjects, a lot of having nothing to do or any interest of anybody who's participating. So I'll try to shut up now, and we'll go ahead and run through your slides here. And one thing I'll mention to everyone, please don't forget when you open up those 2-ounce tasting sets, please do them on a flat surface. We do fill them all the way up to the very top to limit any oxygen in the bottles. And so when you open those, I hate for that drips to dump on your clothes or much less your computer. So we'll go ahead and get you started here. And take it away.
Great. Joe, do you want to go down to, am I in control or do you have it?
Nope. Oh, no, I'm in control. You just tell me where you want to go.
Yeah, let's go down to the overview of the components in the wine. It's a couple more slides down. Okay. There you go. Can you go back up to one more? There we go. So this is, there we go. This is a good overview, kind of looking at the Willamette Valley. We're still, if you see where Salem, the star, the capital of Oregon, you're still really in the North Willamette Valley. So everything that we're talking about and everything that's going into the Kings Ridge blend is coming from vineyards in the North Willamette Valley. Also, just as a reference point, the crazy fires that we have had were just to the east of Salem in the foothills of the Cascades. The air quality down in that area has just been horrible. So you can imagine that, Eola, Amity Hills, vines down in that neck of the woods have definitely been impacted by the smoke that we've had over the last week and a half. Within Chehalem Mountain, we have Bald Peak Vineyard, and then as part of Chehalem Mountain, Ribbon Ridge, which is home to some very well-known wineries, is a little sub appellation of the Chehalem Mountain range. So we can go down. Yeah, go ahead. So Ribbon Ridge is probably one of my all-time favorite little pieces of the Willamette Valley. We are fortunate to work with and have been working for a number of years with a vineyard called Row and Row there. It actually tends, because it sits down and it's kind of sheltered, it tends to be a cooler area. the sedimentary soils that are there are definitely making kind of darker styled wines. They tend to have a really good acid backbone. You have Brickhouse, Beaufrere, Patricia Green Cellars. Josh Bergstrom actually just purchased a piece of property up on in that neck of the woods. So there are some really world-class wines being made off of that piece of property.
So Ryan, everybody's got the samples in front of them. Should they? Do you want to have them hold off on the sampling right now, or
no? Let's go ahead and
and
let's open up the first sample.
All right, so that's the Ribbon Ridge.
That should be the Row and Row, I believe.
Row and Row, okay. Give me a...
Yeah, Joe, we'll be a little bit out of sequence with the way the slides run, but if you go down a couple slides, you'll find Row and Row, and there's a little description of the property.
Perfect. There it is.
So I'll give everyone just a moment. But this is a newer planting, meaning it was planted in the last 10 years up there. So it's kind of coming into its own. It's also probably one of the larger plantings, 74 acres up there. So it gives us a lot of opportunity. Maybe it's a little bit of me becoming an older guy in this industry, but you know, the Oregon wine industry for Pinot is built on the back of Pomard and Badensville. Those are classic clones that at other points in my career, everybody was geeking out about the Dijon clones. And I think we've all come to realize that there was something magical about the selection that some of the early pioneers had in putting those in. So you note that in this blend, you know, we have both of those along with some Dijon clones. You can also see this makes up a significant amount, 25% of the blend. So it's adds a healthy contribution to the resulting wines. I think the thing I love about this area is it tends to make very kind of dark fruit. You can be in that kind of dark cherry and even move into some black fruit flavors in some years. It has a level of kind of spice and a little bit of kind of forest floor and earth that I find very attractive. So this is a really good cornerstone to the Kings Ridge blend.
And if anybody wants to unmute to comment on any of the wines, please feel free to, or ask any questions on the Row and Row there, or pop them into the chat as well. And with nothing there, Ryan, why don't you go ahead and we'll keep going. What direction you want me to go?
So the next wine, also still from Ribbon Ridge, should be Looney Vineyard.
So we'll go ahead and open up the Looney Vineyard there. Now, do you know the source of the name there? That's a family name?
It is a family name. So Looney Vineyard was actually planted. The ground is was leased by Archery Summit back in the late 90s, and they established Looney Vineyard in the early 2000s. It was the only, for Gary Andrus, the founder of Archery Summit, was the only non-Dundee Hills property that they had in the Archery Summit portfolio. You can imagine in kind of typical classic Archery Summit fashion, you know, very high-end farming, very intensive attention to detail. This just recently has been released by Archery Summit as they've kind of taken a new direction and only want to focus on the Dundee Hills. So we actually have leased the vineyard for a couple of years, giving us a nice foothold in the Ribbon Ridge. And the Looney family has owned this agricultural ground for many generations. I don't even know, but it's an old farming family in the valley.
That's awesome.
But this sits a little bit lower, and in its aspect also sits on the east side of the Ribbon Ridge appellation, where Row and Row sits on the west side of the slope. So a little bit warmer on this site, and even though it's only about 50 feet lower, it's definitely a little bit warmer in its profile. So this is another kind of exciting contribution. I think it gives some of the similar flavor and aromatic profile as the Row and Row property, but certainly giving us a little bit of a different edge to work with over there.
Absolutely. I have to say, Ryan, I'm very bummed to have said that the success of your hosting today outnumbered the sample sets that we have. So I'm not able to taste right along with them, but I am very jealous of those that are tasting it. But the breakdowns of these vineyards is just unbelievable.
Yeah, and so let's just to kind of keep that moving. I think if you go back up, we would go to the Beacon Hill Vineyard. And again, in kind of iconic people, this was the original home of Soder Vineyards. Tony Soder and his wife purchased this property and developed the vineyard back in the 90s. When he started his Oregon project, this is where all the fruit was coming from. In the end, he decided to establish some other vineyards, and he sold the property, somewhere 2006-07. And my old business partner, George Hilberry, he and his family actually purchased this property in 2010. And so we've been purchasing fruit now for quite a number of years from them. Still on marine sediment soils. This is also an area which actually would be fun from an aerial view standpoint, but this kind of tucks back up into a little kind of enclosed niche just in the way the topography is. So it's a very sheltered site.
I think you had a map of it.
Yep.
Is it this one or?
It's Yamhill. Yeah. Do we have a map though? I don't know if we do.
Was this it? No.
So if you're looking at if you kind of go off to the northwest corner of Ribbon Ridge, where it says Yamhill Carlton, it actually is kind of sitting back up in that zone. So more to your left, Joe, but it's sitting out in that zone. And this, you're kind of in between, from a topography standpoint, you're in between these land masses that's quite protected in there. And so it's just an interesting little site. I think for us, it's an interesting intersection. We don't really have a lot in the Yamhill Carlton area. And so it gives us a little bit of exposure to some different soils up there. This also sits a little bit lower. And so typically you'd assume lower elevation vineyard tend to be a little bit warmer, but because of where this vineyard sits, it actually tends to be a little more of a cooler property that's harvesting on the later side.
Okay.
I really love the kind of spicy qualities, and we get some nice little floral notes out of the wines from this site. It just makes very elegant wines.
All right, and then Bald Peak is my guess on the next one.
Yeah, it's probably good to jump back up and catch that. Bald Peak is high up in the Chehalem Mountain range. This sits kind of to the east of Adelsheim, is probably the most kind of noteworthy geographic identifier. at about 800 feet. It's high by Oregon standards, but it's interesting, you know, from when I started in the business, 800 feet would have absolutely been thought of as a high elevation Willamette Valley vineyard. Today we have vines that are up over 1,000 feet, and that's kind of the new frontier for where vineyards are being developed. So just interesting to see. We won't get political, but you know, the idea that there's climate change going on, the fact that we're growing grapes higher and higher and doing it successfully might speak to that. This site was originally planted by the Lawton family, and I've known Keith and his wife for most of my career. We started leasing this property in 2006. I literally would be out there on nights and weekends, running tractor myself, trying to farm this and keep up with everything that I had going on back then. It's a small site, but it is very close to, this is actually located on Kings Grade. So the original Kings Ridge vineyard is just down the hill, which is now Jacob Hart. So you're kind of absolutely in the same neighborhood. You have a combination of own rooted, the 115, and there actually is some rootstock blocks there. And there's an amazing little 1 acre of Riesling on that property that often goes into the Kings Ridge Riesling. So this is a neat little site. There's a lot of new vineyard development all around it. It was very much a pioneer vineyard up in that area for a long time, with nobody else having any vines around it. And these wines, in part because of the elevation, can be very kind of finesse driven, but they have good structure. So it's like, I guess I'd say kind of more elegant fruit, red fruited, but with the acidity and kind of long hang time, they still can really have a good acid and tannic structure to the wine. So really enjoy that site. It's a good introduction or good contributing component to the Kings Ridge blend.
Absolutely. It's, you know, it's just stunning to see these different vineyard sites going into such a value dominated wine. Obviously, the reason you guys decided to do this, but it's just great. Now, Laurelwood, the location for this, isn't that one of the new AVAs?
Yeah, though that AVA, and I have to admit, there's a bunch of new AVAs that have popped up, and I haven't wrapped my head around all the technicalities. I'm fairly certain that Laurelwood is actually up over the backside of the mountain here, so this vineyard actually wouldn't fall into the AVA. But Laurelwood soils are, I'm going to say, fairly rare. There's not a lot of vineyard ground planted on them. I've been fortunate to work with a couple of them, but Ponzi is probably one of the more notable wineries that, you know, most of its vineyards are planted on Laurelwood soils. The windblown Loess soils.
Yes.
So Joe, I think we can move down to McMinnville and to Bass Hill.
All right, McMinnville next. Let me go ahead and share that guy with us. So here we are in McMinnville.
Yeah, so maybe go one more down.
Okay.
So McMinnville is another area where there is increasingly more vineyards planted, but historically has not had a lot of vineyard development. There are some kind of notable properties that now in that AVA have been developed out there with the Britain brand, is home vineyard is there. Mumtazi Vineyard, Macera is the brand. They have quite a large vineyard there. and Highland Vineyard, one of the kind of really old pioneering vineyards, high elevation vineyard that's now owned by Laurent Montaillou from Northwest Wine Company, is up there. A vineyard that I worked with early in my career at Bergstrom. And all of these sites, because of their proximity to the Pacific, the Van Duzer corridor, they have, like clockwork, you can go up there in around 3 o'clock and you can feel the winds pick up, and they all have these thick skinned Pinots that they grow in that area. So lots of color, they hold on to their acidity, lots of structure in these wines. And Bass Hill sits a little bit into the Coast Range. We started leasing Bass Hill in 2014. And this vineyard has historically been part of the Amity Vineyards portfolio as a property that was leased. And at one point they lost control of the lease. And I was very excited when my brother and I bought Amity Vineyards back in 2014. We were able to lease this property and have been in control of the farming there now the last 6 years. This site is challenging. It sits kind of in a little bit of a bowl. And so the air movement at times is not great in some parts of it. So we have mildew pressure in some areas and botrytis. So there's definitely some challenges. The farm out here, it is a very cool site. It tends to be very low yielding, but it really makes some pretty exquisite wines. So a small part of this does go into Kings Ridge, as you see here, 5%. And this really is a interesting, probably complexing contribution to the blend, just by the nature of the wines that we get off the site. And this is both a single vineyard now and a contributor to the Amity Vineyards portfolio. So it's a fun wine to show up inside of the Kings Ridge blend, just by its pedigree and the quality that we get off of the site.
Oh, am I supposed to, should I put that into the PO right away then? Yeah.
And this tends to be a little bit of a heavier, darker fruits, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So again, kind of probably if I listen to myself over again later tonight, when I show the kids the video of their dad, doing this great presentation today. Yeah, humor is not always my strong suit either. It definitely kind of high acid and structured. I mean, you have thick-skinned, kind of thicker skin, so you tend to get both supported by the higher acidity, but you will get more extraction here, good tannic backbone. So yeah, I think in the slide we say edgier personality, and I think that's appropriate.
Okay. All right.
So you can really take this grouping of vineyards, I think both kind of speaking to the quality of the appellations, the quality of the vineyards. Part of, you kind of teed this up, Joe, is part of our philosophy has always been, making value wine is not about inexpensive fruit. I think in Oregon, and maybe so much kind of foundationally coming from the challenges of the 1997 vintage, to me, it's about how do we find great fruit that we can work with? And then in the winery, what are the efficiencies that we can get to have the outcomes that we're looking for in terms of quality of the ultimate wine, but the ability to hit these kind of value price points. And it's not by skimping on our sourcing from a vineyard standpoint or the inputs that we put into the vineyard. Bass Hill is a great example of, it's a good year if we get 2 tons of the acre out there. Mm-hmm. And so we're definitely utilizing what others might consider fairly expensive fruit for, wine that sells under $20 a bottle. But I think we've looked at it as like, that allows the consistency of quality. That's my biggest contribution to what I can do from a qualitative standpoint, is working with great fruit. And in the winery, we can use, scale, larger fermenters. We can look at our oak aging regime. And at a certain point, we've just simply benefit by the volume of wine we make. And so our manufacturing costs, if you will, or production costs are not that high. I think the wines speak for themselves in terms of quality.
Yeah, I mean, just every single time that I do, these different tastings, and you go through and punch out different, price points that people are hitting for wine in general, especially when you do a Pinot Noir shot where you're pulling wine from Burgundy, you're pulling wine from California, and then you pull in the Kings Ridge. I mean, it is unbelievable the value that you're getting out of those bottles. And I would imagine right along with all of these individual single vineyards, beautiful properties coming into this, it's hard to believe that you're able to do that at that price point, which is just awesome. So now I think everybody's got the Kings Ridge as the next wine to taste. I would imagine is the correct order.
Yep. Yeah. So the oak regime for the ultimate wine, we're shooting somewhere around 20%, depends on the vintage. I've always been a believer that oak in wine, or new oak and toast in wine, should be supporting of fruit. So sitting underneath and lifting up the fruit and showcasing it, adding a little bit of complexity. But so we're probably pretty light-handed, I guess I'd say. We're definitely looking to showcase that, and kind of beat the drum here, but showcasing the fruit. I think that's so much what Oregon is about. Both Oregon is very much about vintage, and I think the characteristics of the fruit and the expression of the fruit, the acidity that we get in our wines. And so we're very, very focused on, from a stylistic standpoint, just trying to preserve that. I think there's also kind of an interesting thing in the Valley with, we're a big agricultural state, and there's a lot of, from blackberries, raspberries, marionberries, so all that kind of caneberry. It's interesting that I think a lot of our Pinots taste like the agriculture that also grows around us. And so there's kind of interesting connection to some of those, and maybe it's just convenient, but we have growers who also are, diversified agricultural operations, and they're growing blackberries and blueberries. And so when you go and you taste our wines, I think that fresh fruit is very much a part of these wines. When I think about, Burgundy, or I think about California, to me, either the tannic or acid structures kind of push different directions, and some of the fruit profile pushes differently. And I think Oregon just carves out a really nice niche as differentiation amongst those kind of three. Well, I don't know, maybe I'm not going to say California is a classic Pinot Noir growing region, but I'll certainly say Burgundy is.
I don't think you'll find many people that are going to argue that point, for sure.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to bring up that you had a slide on, and I'll go ahead and pop this slide up, is a gentleman who I had the opportunity to meet when I was out there visiting, JP. Tell us a little bit about your partnership there.
I heard his voice come through the office as he's working 7 days a week right now. Sorry, got some sunshine on me. So JP and my brother actually met at Constellation Brands in the Central Coast of California early in both of their careers, and I was very fortunate to get to know him a little bit. And he had left working for Estancia Winery, went to go work for a small Pinot and kind of Rhone producer in Santa Cruz, who actually, as a side, in the fires that were just down there, the Big Basin winery managed to survive the fires, but the owner of Big Basin's house, which is on the same property, burnt to the ground. So just how crazy all this has been over the last month out here. JP has spent time in kind of, larger scale production oriented wineries that are really focused still on making, great wines, and then kind of high touch, small lot wineries in his career. And he came up here in April 2014 to help run winemaking. I had just finished a consulting career that was kind of the latter part of my winemaking career, and really needed somebody to watch over the wines day to day as our business was continuing to grow. And he's been a great partner and a great friend to our organization and to myself personally and my brother. Joe, you started off by saying, working with family, and, I'd say that guy is akin to working with family, even though we don't share the same genetics. So super smart guy, great palate, passionate about what he does. That old boy, the dog that's there with JP, passed away just about a year ago, which has been a big loss to all of us. But certainly to JP and his wife. And he's really done a phenomenal job in terms of, managing, the Underwood brand and the challenges that we have in terms of the growth and diversity that we do there, to, focus on Alchemist and Amity, and kind of, what I like to say is kind of, the devil's in the details of those wines, and really focusing on all the small little aspects of winemaking that are the kind of incremental inputs that, differentiate those wines at the kind of for what we're trying to do with them compared to the Underwood and Kings Ridge line. So great guy, great leadership. He's put together a great team at this point. Winemaking's 5 people. He has 4 other winemakers who work with him to keep everything moving around here. So he's got a lot on his plate.
For all that you guys do, it's amazing what a tight small group you guys have, and you guys just are really doing a great job.
Thanks, Joe.
Absolutely. Well, if we have any questions for Ryan, if you want to go ahead and throw those in the chat, or at this point we can go ahead and unmute. Ryan, was there anything else that we missed in my terrible touring through your slides? I apologize about that.
No, it's no. I think we covered them. Again, I think this is a fun tasting. We've had really great feedback in kind of breaking apart the Kings Ridge blend this way, and being able to speak to the individual elements. If anyone's ever come out for Pinot Camp, I think, this would be something that we would do here as part of Pinot Camp, to be able to kind of talk about, what you're getting from different areas in the valley. And so this, in a very small, much simpler way, is an interesting way to kind of bring some of that experience to each of you. So appreciate everyone getting on this morning.
Absolutely. I think the biggest thanks is, of course, to you. And I feel like we should let you get back to what I'm sure is a start of a crazy day out there in the Willamette. Thank you very much for coming in a little early on your side. I'm actually, it's harvest. You're probably in hours before this, but it's great to see you, sir.
It's great to see you.
All right. We'll talk to you very soon. Yeah.
I'm happy. If there are questions, Joe, I'm happy to, I don't know how we're doing on time, but
great. Our time is fine. And as far as there's a number of comments that about the different wines and their flavors, but no questions have come through. If anybody wants to unmute to throw Ryan a question or two, please feel free to do so.
Ryan, this is Leo with Glunz. What percentage of the Kings Ridge fruit is going into Underwood?
That's becomes a challenging. I need a better cheat sheet that I don't have in front of me. Our Willamette Valley, so directionally, So if we directionally are making, trying to think of what the math looks like. If we're directionally making somewhere in the ballpark of 250,000 cases of Pinot Noir for the whole company, about half of that is Willamette Valley Pinot. So there's still a fairly healthy amount of Willamette Valley going into the Underwood Pinot. The harder part of that analysis is some of those vineyards, even though they're in the Willamette Valley, I never would say are in consideration for Kings Ridge. So it's not so much that they're flowing down. I think in some respects with the Willamette Valley, it's what are the Alchemist vineyards that, and to a lesser degree, Amity vineyards, Amity properties that are being farmed for the Amity Vineyards project. What of those are passing through? And we're seeing a little bit of that. You know, Row and Row is a component of Alchemist. Looney is a component of Alchemist. Bass Hill is a single vineyard that has just being released now, but a single vineyard that comes out of the Amity Vineyards program. So in some respects, you're seeing those vineyards where we know we don't need all the fruit that, you know, Kings Ridge is benefiting from kind of the pedigree of what we're trying to do for those particular other labels is passing through into Kings Ridge. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question greatly, but
It sounded like it was a pretty full answer there. Any other questions? Please feel free to unmute or throw them in the chat.